My name is Maya Reed. I'm sitting behind my old elementary school, staring at a box of hand-painted wedding place cards I spent 3 nights making. 10 minutes ago, I heard my father say I was never an investment, just a risk they could not afford. Then I learned the money my grandmother left for my future never disappeared. It paid for my sister's first office. I grew up in Pine Hollow, Ohio, the kind of town where everybody knew what you ordered for breakfast and which family you belonged to before you even introduced yourself. My parents, Joan and Malcolm Reed, owned a small diner on Maple Street. It had red vinyl booths, a silver counter, and a bell above the door that sounded tired by the time I was 10. That diner was our whole life. My father opened it before sunrise, my mother handled the books, and my sister Kira and I learned early that love in our house often came with a job attached. Fold napkins. Refill ketchup bottles. Smile at customers. Do not complain when your feet hurt. Kira was 2 years older than me, and from the beginning, everyone called her sharp. She could add a check in her head faster than the old register could print it. She knew which customers tipped well, which suppliers overcharged, and how to talk my father into trying a new breakfast special. By middle school, she was already telling him how to raise prices without losing regulars. My parents loved that about her. They would point to Kira across the diner and say, "That girl is going somewhere." They said it to customers, to relatives, to anyone willing to listen. My father would laugh and say Kira had business in her bones. My mother kept every certificate Kira earned in a folder near the office safe. I was different. I liked the quiet hours after lunch, when the diner emptied and sunlight came through the front windows. I would sit at the last booth with crayons, pencils, napkins, receipt paper, anything I could draw on. I painted flowers on the chalkboard menu. I sketched the regulars while they drank coffee. I loved the way a blank page made room for things people were too tired to say. For a while, I thought my parents loved that part of me too. My mother would say my drawings were cute. My father would let me decorate the holiday menu. But as I got older, cute became impractical. Creative became risky. Art became something they mentioned with a tight smile, like a cold that would pass if nobody encouraged it. Kira brought home awards from business clubs. I brought home paintings from school exhibits. Kira got a celebration dinner. I got, "That's nice, sweetheart, but what are you going to do with it?" When I was 16, my grandmother Ruth came to one of my student art shows. She stood in front of a watercolor I had made of the diner at dawn, and she did not speak for a long time. Then she squeezed my hand and said, "You see things other people walk past." No one had ever said that to me before. Grandma Ruth was not rich, but she was careful. She saved grocery coupons, reused wrapping paper, and kept her cash in envelopes with labels written in blue pen. Before she died, she told me she had set something aside for my education. Not a fortune, she said, but enough to help me start. She said every child deserved one person who bet on them without needing proof first. After her funeral, I asked my parents about it. My mother said the money had been tied up in medical bills and diner repairs. My father said life was complicated, and I needed to stop thinking of money as a promise. I was 17. I believed them because children usually believe the people who raised them, even when their stomach tells them not to. So I worked. I won a partial scholarship to a state college, took out loans, cleaned classrooms at night, and studied art education because I wanted to teach kids like me that their quiet gifts were not useless. My parents came to my graduation, but they left early because Kira had an open house for a luxury property the same afternoon. By then, Kira had become everything they hoped she would become. She got her real estate license, joined a successful firm, then opened her own boutique office in Columbus. She wore tailored coats and drove a white SUV with leather seats. She sent my parents photos of ribbon cuttings, client dinners, and commission checks. My father printed some of them and taped them inside the diner office. I became an art teacher at a community center and later started helping at the public elementary school. I loved my work. I loved watching a child who never spoke in class suddenly explain a painting with their whole face. I loved seeing angry kids draw storms, lonely kids draw houses, scared kids draw doors opening. But love did not pay much. My apartment was small. My car made a clicking sound in winter. My student loans followed me like a second shadow. Whenever money came up at family dinners, my parents looked at me like I had chosen hardship just to make a point. Kira never treated me badly on purpose. That almost made it harder. She sent birthday gifts. She liked my social media posts. She called me talented. But she also floated above the family like proof that my parents had been right about everything. Next to her, my life looked like a draft they wished they could edit. Then Kira got engaged to Graham, a surgeon from Cincinnati whose family owned a vacation house in Colorado. The wedding was planned for a lodge outside Aspen. Snow, glass walls, string lights, custom everything. My parents were thrilled. My mother called it the event our family deserved. My father told everyone at the diner that his oldest daughter was marrying into a beautiful future. When Kira asked me to be maid of honor, I said yes before I looked at the costs. I wanted to believe she chose me because she needed me, not because the role was expected. Then the emails started coming. There was the bridal shower in Columbus. The bachelorette weekend in Denver. The dress that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The lodge room. The flight. The hair appointment. The makeup appointment. The group gift. The handmade welcome bags. Every new message felt like a polite little bill sliding under my door. I tried to be honest with Kira. I told her I was excited, but I was stretched thin. She sounded concerned and said we would figure it out. But my mother called me later and told me not to make Kira feel guilty during the happiest season of her life. So I found ways. I picked up extra classes at the center. I painted murals for a daycare on weekends. I stopped buying coffee. I stopped going out with my boyfriend Noah because every dinner felt like money I should be saving for someone else's wedding. No one noticed. Of course he did. He was a sound technician for a small theater, which meant he understood what it was like to work hard and still count every dollar. One night, he found me at my kitchen table, painting tiny pine branches on place cards because Kira wanted a personal touch. He looked at the stack and asked if she was paying me. I said, "It's my gift." He said, "Maya, a gift should not leave you unable to breathe." I wanted to argue, but I could not. Because somewhere deep down, I knew the wedding had become another test. If I paid, smiled, painted, traveled, and never complained, maybe my parents would finally see me as loyal. Maybe they would stop looking at me like the child who chose wrong. The week before the wedding, I went to the diner to drop off the place cards. My mother had asked me to bring them because she wanted to pack them with the welcome bags. It was late afternoon, between lunch and dinner. The bell over the door rang when I walked in, but nobody was up front. I heard voices from the office near the back hallway. At first, I was going to call out. Then I heard my name. My father said, "Maya has been making faces about the expenses again." My mother sighed and said, "She always acts like the world is asking too much of her." Then Kira spoke. Her voice was softer. She said, "I think she is really struggling. Teaching does not pay well, and she still has loans. Maybe I should cover her room." For 1 second, I felt relief. Not because I wanted money from Kira, but because she had noticed. Then my mother said, "Absolutely not. We have helped enough by letting her stay involved. She needs to learn responsibility." My father laughed once, not loudly, but enough to make my skin go cold. He said, "Your sister was never built for responsibility. That is why we put Ruth's education account where it could actually grow." I stood still in the hallway. Kira asked, "What account?" There was a pause. My mother said, "Your grandmother left some money for Maya, years ago. It was not much. We used it when you were opening your first office. The lease deposit, the licensing fees, the furniture. We knew you would multiply it. And you did." Kira said nothing. My father said if we had given it to Maya, she would have spent it on some art program and still ended up broke. We made the practical choice. The box slipped in my hands. One corner hit the wall. The voices stopped. I did not wait for them to come out. I walked through the diner, past the counter I had wiped as a child, past the booths where my father used to brag about Kira, past the chalkboard menu where my painted sunflowers were still fading around the edges. I got into my car and set the box of place cards on the passenger seat. I kept staring at them. Tiny pine branches. Tiny names. Tiny proof that I had given hours of myself to people who had been taking from me for years. That was the part that broke me. Not just the money. The story. The lie. The way they had watched me struggle and let me believe there had been nothing for me. They had not lost my future. They had chosen where it belonged. For 7 days, I did not answer family calls. My mother texted first, asking if I had forgotten the welcome bags. Then Kira called, then Graham, then my father. I turned my phone over and went to work. At school, I helped a boy named Matteo finish a painting of a blue house with no windows. He told me windows were dangerous because people could look in. I wanted to sit down on the floor and cry. Instead, I asked him what the house needed to feel safe. He thought for a minute, then painted a yellow door. That week, I thought a lot about doors. Noah came over every night with soup, groceries, or silence, depending on what I could handle. Brianna, my friend from the community center, sat with me after classes and said things I was not ready to say out loud. That what my parents did was not practical. It was betrayal. That being calm about it would not make it smaller. That I could love them and still name what they had done. The hardest part was Kira. I kept hearing her voice asking, "What account?" I kept replaying that moment. She had not sounded guilty. She had sounded shocked. But shock did not erase the fact that her first office, the thing our parents still talked about like a family miracle, had been built partly on money meant for me. On the 8th day, I sent one message to my parents and Kira. Dinner. Thursday. Miller's Grill. 6 o'clock. We need to talk. My mother replied in less than a minute. About what? I did not answer. They were already seated when I arrived. My father looked annoyed, my mother looked worried, and Kira looked like she had not slept. Graham was not there. I was glad. This was not his history to carry. I sat down, folded my hands, and said, "I heard everything in the diner office." My mother closed her eyes. My father leaned back and said, "Maya, you misunderstood." I said, "Then explain it." Nobody spoke. So I did. I told them I heard them talk about Grandma Ruth's education account. I heard them say they used it for Kira's first office. I heard my father say giving it to me would have been a waste. I said every word slowly because I wanted to watch them live inside the truth they had hidden from me. Kira started crying before my parents did. She looked at them and asked, "Is that true?" My mother said, "We were trying to help the family." Kira said, "No." "Is it true?" My father rubbed his face and said, "It was not enough to change Maya's whole life." I almost laughed. I said, "You do not get to decide that after stealing it." My mother flinched like I had slapped her. She whispered, "We did not steal it. We managed it." I said, "You managed me out of my own grandmother's last gift." That was the first time my father looked directly at me. Really looked. Not like I was an inconvenience. Not like I was a bill. Not like I was a daughter who had failed to become impressive. Just looked. But he still said the wrong thing. He said, "Kira had a real opportunity. We had to think about what would last." I said, "And I did not last?" The table went quiet. Years of small moments crowded into that silence. Graduation flowers bought from a gas station. Phone calls cut short because Kira had news. My paintings called hobbies. My loans treated like proof of bad choices. My parents had not ignored me in one dramatic moment. They had done it in hundreds of ordinary ones. Kira pushed her chair back and stood up. For a second, I thought she was leaving. Instead, she walked around the table and sat beside me. She said, "I did not know." I nodded because I believed her. Then she said, "But I benefited from it. So I need to make it right." My father said, "Kira, do not be ridiculous." Kira turned to him so fast he stopped talking. She said, "No. Ridiculous is letting my sister drown in debt while you hang my office photo in the diner like a trophy." My mother began to cry. She said they had been scared. The diner was unstable. Kira had a chance to lift the family name. They thought I would be fine because I was resourceful. Because I always found a way. That word hit me harder than I expected. Resourceful. I said, "You keep calling my survival a personality trait." It was not. It was what I had left after you gave the help to someone else. No one had an answer for that. Kira asked how much I still owed. I told her I did not want her money in the middle of an argument. She said it was not charity. It was repayment. I told her repayment would not fix everything. She said she knew. And that mattered. Because money can pay a loan, but it cannot apologize by itself. A check does not sit with you through the nights you wondered why you were less worthy. A bank transfer does not rewrite the years you spent believing your struggle was your fault. Repair begins when someone stops defending the wound and starts caring how deep it went. Before I left, my father asked if I was still coming to the wedding. I looked at Kira. She looked terrified of the answer. I said, I do not know yet. That was the first honest thing I had said to them in years. Over the next few days, Kira did what she said she would do. She asked for my loan information. I hesitated, but Noah reminded me that refusing repair would not prove I was strong. It would only keep me paying for their choice. So I gave Kira the numbers. She paid off the remaining balance of my student loans. She also covered my flight and room for the wedding. When I tried to tell her it was too much, she said, it was already too much when you were the only one paying. My parents did not transform overnight. People rarely do. My mother sent a long text that began with too many explanations and not enough apology. I did not respond. 2 days later, she sent another one. This time it only said, I am sorry. Your grandmother trusted us. We failed you. My father called and left a voicemail. His voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. He said he had spent his life trying to keep the diner alive and thought that meant choosing the safest bet. Then he said, you were never a bad bet, Maya. I was wrong to think of my daughters that way. I listened to that voicemail 3 times. I did not call back right away. I needed them to understand something. I was not a locked door they could open with one apology. I was a person learning where the hinges had been damaged. The wedding weekend arrived in a blur of snow and white lights. Aspen looked like something from a postcard, all sharp mountains and soft roofs, the kind of beauty that makes people lower their voices. Kira's lodge was breathtaking. Glass walls, pine beams, candles everywhere. Guests kept saying it was perfect. That word followed me around all weekend. Perfect dress. Perfect flowers. Perfect couple. Perfect family. At the rehearsal dinner, my parents were polite in a way that felt careful. My mother asked about my students. Not as a distraction, not as a quick courtesy, but with follow-up questions. My father asked if I still painted the diner menu boards. I told him sometimes. He said the sunflowers were his favorite part of the place. I did not know what to do with that, so I just nodded. The morning of the wedding, Kira came to my room before anyone else was awake. Her hair was undone, and she was holding 2 cups of coffee. She sat on the edge of my bed and said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. I said, okay. She said, do you want to stand beside me today, or are you doing it because you think you have to? I looked at my sister, really looked at her. For years, I had seen her through my parents' pride. She was the golden child, the proof, the investment that paid off. But sitting there in sweatpants with shaking hands, she was also my sister. A woman who had just learned that part of her success had a shadow. I told her the truth. I said, I want to stand beside you. But not as the sister who is expected to swallow everything. I want to stand there as myself. Kira started crying again. Then she laughed because she was tired of crying. She said, I can live with that. The ceremony was beautiful. Graham cried when Kira walked down the aisle. My father cried too, though he tried to hide it. My mother held my hand for a second before we walked out, and I let her. Not because everything was fixed, but because I wanted to choose what kind of person I became after being hurt. At the reception, I gave a toast. I had written 3 versions and thrown them all away. In the end, I spoke from the small folded card in my hand. I said love is not proven by perfect photos or expensive rooms. It is proven by what we do when the truth makes us uncomfortable. I said marriage would ask Kira and Graham to see each other clearly, not just when they were impressive, but when they were afraid, wrong, tired, or unfinished. I said the best families are not the ones with no mistakes. They are the ones brave enough to stop calling mistakes by nicer names. The room was quiet for a moment. Then people clapped. Kira hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. After the wedding, life did not turn into a movie ending. My parents did not suddenly become perfect listeners. I did not suddenly forget every birthday where I felt like a guest in my own family. Healing was not a switch. It was more like repainting a wall that had been stained for years. One coat was not enough. But it was a beginning. Kira and I started having dinner once a month without our parents. At first, we talked about safe things. Work, Graham, Noah, the weather. Then slowly, we talked about harder things. She admitted she liked being the favorite because it made her feel safe. I admitted I resented her even when she had not personally hurt me. Neither confession was pretty, but both were true. My parents came to the community center's spring art show 3 months later. I almost did not invite them. Then I decided an invitation was not the same as surrender. They came early and stood near the back wall, looking uncertain. Mateo, the boy who had painted the blue house, had a piece in the show. This time, his house had windows. Big yellow ones. When my father asked him about it, Mateo pointed at me and said, "Miss Reed told me houses can have doors and still be safe." My father did not say anything for a long time. On the drive home, he called me. He said, "I think I understand a little more now. What you do is not a hobby." I pulled over before I answered. I said no. It never was. My mother began helping me organize donated supplies for the center. Sometimes she tried too hard. Sometimes she apologized for things I was not ready to discuss. Sometimes I had to say, "Not today." And for once, she listened. That became our new language. "Not today. I need time." That hurt me. Please do not compare us. I am not asking you to fix it right now. I am asking you to hear me. Those sentences changed more than any grand speech could have. Looking back, I think the worst part of being the overlooked child is not the lack of applause. It is how you learn to make yourself smaller so nobody has to admit they left you out. You spend years becoming easy. Easy to disappoint. Easy to reschedule. Easy to underpay, undervalue, and misunderstand. But the day I heard my father call me a risk, something inside me stopped trying to be easy. I did not become cruel. I did not destroy my sister's wedding. I did not cut my family off forever. But I stopped helping them pretend that practicality was the same as love. Grandma Ruth once told me every child deserves one person who bets on them without needing proof first. For a long time, I thought I had lost that person when I lost her. Now I understand something else. Sometimes, you become that person for yourself. You stop waiting for your family to hand you a receipt that says you are worth the cost. You stop measuring your life against the child they chose first. You stop confusing being useful with being loved. My relationship with my family is still healing. Some days are warm. Some days are awkward. Some days an old comment opens an old bruise, and I have to remind myself that forgiveness does not mean pretending I was never hurt. But I am no longer sitting in my car with someone else's wedding cards in my lap, wondering why I was not enough. I was enough when I painted on napkins in the back booth. I was enough when I took out loans and built a life from scraps. I was enough when my parents could not see it. And I am enough now, even on the days they are still learning how. If your family only claps when you become profitable, I hope you remember this. You are not a bad investment. You are a human being. And the people who truly love you will not need you to multiply their money before they decide you matter.